Okay, so the purpose of this video and my, intervention in already a pre-recorded interaction between Mike Holt and myself back in 2022 is because of a request I was handed to really help anyone who's interested in learning and growing, understanding the position of a lawful head of state, otherwise known as an office holder of sovereign, who is like the steward that promises to keep a structure together that supports the people being self-governing. And also how that links with the creation of the 1688 Bill of Rights, how that's connected to the Australian Constitution, which isn't an actual constitution, and also the elimination of trial by jury, which is the centerpiece of anything that's a legitimate constitution. And if people do not understand these fundamental principles, how they were all usurped, inverted, well before Australia was even colonised, and that was the founding principle, the inversion of reality of how the colony was set up, and who was the actual people who, created what they call a constitution, who were they, why it was created in a way where Parliament actually was sovereign over the people. Right, and that you know that because if Parliament has the power to decide what passes as legislation that has the force of law, then they own the people, and that's actually embedded in this 1901 Australian Constitution. So, without any further ado, I'm just going to play the aspects that happened live, and then I'm going to interject with parts that were missing in that time. That's going to help, possibly, fingers crossed, add some more context to bring out the knowledge that wasn't covered in the original exchange. Do you mind if I chime in for a second, if that's okay?
Yeah, go.
So I want to go back to something Mike said when you said, Mike, about they wrote the Constitution. When you say they wrote, do you mean parliamentarians?
No, there was a bunch of people back in the 1880s, including Randolph Quirk and what's his name, Quick. And they got together because they were sick and tired of being we had 6 penal colonies. And what they did was they united the 6 penal colonies into 6 states. But they never got rid of the penal side of it. We're still a penal colony of the United Kingdom. But by uniting us into a federation of 6 states, and New Zealand almost joined it, but then opted out, they created this federation. And as part of it, the bedrock of the foundation was this constitution. And they did massive amounts of research on constitutions all around the world, including the US, the French, and lots of others. To be honest with you, I think the Constitution is one of the best that we've, in the world, and it's very imperfect. I admit this.
So I'm just going to cut you off if I can, Mike. Why I'm asking that is, does that still mean in your mind that the head of state still resided in England?
Yes.
Right. So if the head of state is what gives any constitution any kind of legitimacy, does it not mean that the head of state needs to be a lawful monarch?
That's right.
So what if it turned out that there was no lawful monarch in place to grant anything to any colony and nobody knew about it?
That's the conundrum we face now, isn't it?
So that's why I'm asking you. Now, hang on. That's why I'm asking you, who wrote it? See, this is the trick, Mike. You cannot write a constitution if you're still bound to the original one that hasn't ever been changed by the people. You can't write another one.
No, you can't, but you can amend it. But the problem...
No, you can't. But you can't, Mike. The process to amend the Constitution is inside Article 12, inside Magna Carta 1215, and it has never been enacted.
Okay, here is the first correction that I'd like to make. The 1215 Magna Carta contains no reference to a constitutional convention. That concept emerged centuries later during the Enlightenment, when philosophers such as John Locke, Jean-Jacques Rousseau, and Montesquieu, I hope I said that correctly, asserted that legitimate governance requires the express consent of the people. So express consent is done in a specific way, and that is through trial by jury. But that's all we need to know for this, I'm hoping, for this point in time. Enlightenment thought replaced the old feudal notion of giving counsel to the king with the understanding that the people are the rightful framers of the rules, customs, and traditions that align with the underlying moral structure of reality by which they choose to live. Now, I've been very careful to omit the word law because that word gets conflated all the time. And so when I use the word law, I'm only meaning the laws of reality, nothing else. So that's why I take a lot of trouble to make sure that I'm not conflating that with man-made rules. And so the best man can do is create rules, and if we all agree to it, that's how we can live in harmony. And when those rules are made in alignment with how we truly understand, our conscience understands how reality works, then we can actually live cohesively. This thinking later inspired the American colonies, whose assemblies invoked the right to form new binding promises for social cohesion, also known as a constitution, when those holding positions of public office violated natural rights. In this sense, the Constitutional Convention became a secular expression of covenant making, a means for people to reassert organized self-governance when delegated authority no longer serves the public good. So notice I called it delegated authority because if you say authority as on its own, it implies that man can have authority over another man. So when I say man, I mean the species. I don't mean actual a male. And lastly, a constitutional convention represents a framework through which individuals exercise their moral agency to influence how voluntary interaction within their communities can be most effectively organized and served. Hopefully that information was helpful to give you knowledge of what an actual constitutional convention is and its history and why it couldn't have been embedded in the 1215 Magna Carta, because that style of thinking was not available under the limits of feudalism back in that day. All right, now back to the conversation.
It's a sealed agreement. So that means every future monarch, and all a monarch is just an office holder of sovereign, the highest public servant of the land. They are bound to the terms. That's their job contract.
That's right.
So you can't have a whole bunch of other people in another colony starting something separate, right? It's not a thing.
But
this is what people don't understand.
They did. You just said that they.
Just said it.
A whole bunch of people in the 1880s got together and thought getting the states together and creating a federation would be great, and they wrote a constitution. They didn't.
And in 1900, they took that constitution over to Queen Victoria, who was a lawful.
No, she wasn't, Mike. She wasn't.
No, she wasn't.
She was a treasonous monarch. She had no lawful authority.
Well,
because the 16. This is the thing. Like we saw you speak with Karen Bailey, right? And she taught you about the 1688 Bill of Rights, and she told you that was the reason why every single monarch from that point was not a lawful monarch. So everything that happened after 1688 was all part of the treason.
Yeah.
Right. So we know that you know that information because we saw it, and at the same time, we saw you promote Dick's book throughout that actual presentation, right? Which is a conflict right there. This is the part that we're not understanding what you're doing here. Okay, so we know you have new information, right? Yet you're still going back to the old information. So we're trying to work out where are you? Do you understand the true nature of the 1215? That it's a sealed agreement that gives government its legitimacy. It's a contract, an adhesion contract, because government cannot have authority as it is. It has to be granted it. And the only way you can grant authority to a government is to have a contract which binds it. It doesn't bind us. It binds them. We are free in our natural state. Yeah, any agent or officer of government is bound by a constitution, not the people. The only thing that people are bound to is the consciousness of the community around them. That's what Article 39 says, right? If you read it and you truly understand it, that's what that is. Everything else is a fiction created to make people believe they're free, but they're not. Because if we had a lawful structure in place, Mike, we never would have been in any wars. We wouldn't have been in Gallipoli. None of those things would have happened because we would have had trial by jury to make sure that no politician could have put us into anything. So that was never in effect. 1688 was the death of trial by jury. It was the death of the monarch being the people's representative. It made Parliament sovereign, right? Yeah. So everything that happened after that was always going to be corrupt. It was always going to be treason. So you cannot say that 1901 is our constitution because there was no lawful authority to grant it assent. That was a treasonous monarch in place. You cannot hand your job. That's the other thing, right? You cannot hand your job to any child. Nobody can, especially someone who's elected in office. This is all the tricks, Mike. You know what I mean? And you've been shown some of these things.
Yeah,
you're not actually showing that you've understood them.
Yeah, I hear you using the word trick, but the fact is, we face an awful mess, and it's a very tangled mess, and I acknowledge that. And, you know, we've got to start somewhere. And
yes,
no matter,
we're going to start with the truth, Mike. We're going to start with the truth. You can't build truth off a lie.
That's why we're building these assemblies, because it's going to empower the people to make the decisions. And I think eventually what will happen is we'll just discard the Constitution. It's not being used anyway, but it's going to be up to the people to decide how they want to be governed. And they will use they will elect their own people.
Yes, Mike, Mike, I'm sorry to cut you off, but first we need to finalise the contract. Until that's finalised, we can't do anything else, right? And the contract is still alive today. And that is that we, the people, have a right to redress and return the rule of law once it's been usurped from us.
All right, just pausing it there, just to give some more context. Magna Carta 1215 contains articles grounded in authentic common law, affirming that those entrusted with positions of public service, now notice I didn't say authority, become criminal the moment their conduct transgresses moral law and undermines the well-being of the community they have sworn to serve. So basically, everyone's the same, we're all equal. Some of us may choose to volunteer to take up a position of greater responsibility, but that doesn't now give us some magical rights to do whatever we like and impose our will on others, right? So if we don't have that understanding that just because you take up that position of extra responsibility, there's no way that you can become a god for some reason. If that's not truly understood, then what we have today is why things are the way they are, because very few people understand that. And the only place that I'm aware of that those principles are embedded, so that can be actually referred to, is in those articles of common law that sit within the Magna Carta 1215. All right, back to the video.
Now, there's a specific way that government is still bound to hold to that honour, and it's not doing it because the people don't understand it.
So if you're going to have a system where certain people can choose to be taking up positions of responsibility where they get to make decisions that are going to affect others, well, then the only way that can be a just system is if those very people who take up that responsibility actually are accountable to the people that are affected by their decision. So hopefully that's giving you context to what this part is about. Article 61, known as the Security Clause, affirms the principle that when those holding public responsibility betray their oath, the people, through their appointed stewards, and back then when that was sealed in perpetuity, back in 1215, the stewards were the barons, are encouraged and supported to exercise their right to reclaim control of their institutions by taking possession of the public buildings and assets entrusted to public servants until redress is made. So redress is just like rebalancing the scales, where people are made accountable for the decisions they've made that have been a source of harm to the people they're meant to be serving. All right, back to the video.
So if we keep pushing the 1901, that will never happen. We need to finalise that first, right? That hasn't been done because people don't know about it. So until we all get on the same page and the same knowledge, until we get onto one hive mind and we all understand it, if people are giving false messaging, it will never happen. That's why Carl and I are always consistent on this. Because if we all want the same thing, we need to be the tip of that spear, right? And if we're all different spears, it's not going to work, right? So it's all about understanding what the adhesion contract is.
So the adhesion contract that was just mentioned, all that is a constitution, which really essentially is a binding promise made by the people who wish to actually act in roles of service to the people. And so because it's transient, they're never going to be there forever. That's why an office is created. So really anyone who takes in that office will be bound to that same agreement that was originally made when the whole system was created. And so that's what that means. and redress is part of that agreement. So here we go. Redress is achieved by holding public servants accused of abusing their office accountable before juries of the people. Now, if you remember at the beginning, I said I'll get back into trial by jury. So here's a little more on that. Where guilt is determined not merely by a breach of moral law, but by proof of malicious intent demonstrated through conscious disregard for the harm caused by their actions. So what that means is when we, the people, spot that there's behavior happening where our rights are being violated, we are all individually responsible for alerting those people in those positions of public office that are doing that, who are individually accountable, if you remember what I said earlier, for what they're doing, and alerting them to how that office is meant to function and what roles they are allowed to do and when they become criminal. Now, once each individual is alerted to that and they actually ignore it and carry on doing the same violations to your rights, that way to publicly put them on notice, which is very common, you'll hear a lot of people saying send them notices, that now acts as evidence of malicious intent. So that's what that means.
Like if people truly understand the power of the 1215, this is where the actual full asset stripping comes into it, right? If they fully understood that, like it also retroactively wipes out any debt. Retroactively, people don't know that. We, the jury, decide if we want a system of governance that where we're getting taxed or not, right? On how much. That's all us, right? That doesn't exist. It's never had in the 1901 ever. We have the full power to be self-determining through that jury. That's the centerpiece. There's nowhere else that's found. So these things that the American Constitution, the French one, they are not constitutions. They are mind tricks. A constitution has to have trial by jury at the center, because without that, it's government dictatorship. It's plain and simple. There's no other way to put it. Because there has to be a mechanism by which we can actually make it happen. And right now, if you set up alternative, what we call assemblies, where's the power to punish going to come from? Who's got the weapons?
Have you read
that's going to come after you.
Have you read the section on court in the website? It describes exactly what you're talking about.
Yes, Mike, but we still need to have that same messaging from the start, right? We can't just take bits and pieces. It all has to be consistent from the beginning. And what people don't understand is that we don't know the truth. And we need to go back to where authority deviated. And it deviated in 1688, that no longer had any authority. Because the way it works is the monarch takes an oath. A coronation oath is the job contract. Well, that job contract got changed in 1688, where the Parliament wrote it, and it became a statute version. Well, that no longer means that the monarch is bound to the people. It means the monarch is bound to Parliament. So there's been a flip. So they are the master of the monarch. So what does that mean? That means the Parliament's the master of the people. Okay, so everything that happened after that was going to be dictatorship. And that's exactly what happened. And people don't understand it. So if we sit there getting hung up on 1973 or 1966 and all that kind of stuff, it means we don't understand that this wasn't even lawful in the beginning, that we are still bound to English common law because there was no monarch in place, correct one, that was elected by the people to grant any changes to anything. That's why they take an oath. So we can only unseal it, Mike. No one else can unseal it. Only we, the people.
Okay, if anything in this video has resonated with you and you're keen to want to deepen your understanding, I highly recommend coming to this website, magnacarta1215.com, created here in Australia. And if you heard me speak earlier about notices, lots of information here. The notice process created by David Robinson. So that's to do with how to get evidence that people who are meant to be serving the people are acting criminally and they are ignoring their actual role as a public servant. Therefore, that counts as malicious intent when that your notices get brought into a jury of the people. If you're interested in learning, plenty of videos and reading. There's Acts versus Charter, so you can see the difference between living under a lawful structure versus what we live under now. Frequent Q&As, that's jam-packed with information, really expands your awareness. Highly recommend looking into that. Plenty more there. Tons of articles, as you can see, so you can really fill your boots here. action. So there's campaigns that have been put in place for anyone to come and join in. There's one for the judiciary, the police, the council. You've got questions to people who believe they're in authority, and memes and quotes. Social proof, the just video evidence of people standing under Article 61. And the public servants or so-called public servants that, it was interesting to see how they react. It's really worth watching that. If you're interested in starting your own community or seeing if there is already a community in your area, that's the place to look. And then if you want to get in touch, just click on here. So, hopefully that's going to be something that you're going to want to uptake and really invest in.